Thank you. I'm calling to order the meeting of the Legislative Working Group, and also joined by some other members of the commission staff, along with Emily DeSantis. And I believe that's it. We're ready to go. Anything else I should add, Sandy, before I start?
Yeah, just that we do have a quorum.
And we do have a
Present here in person. The state conference center. Of the work.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank the staff, particularly Emily, for putting the necessary material for this committee to have this group to move forward. And the first thing I'd like to ask about is the budget. Sandy circulated yesterday a draft of his testimony, and I have some thoughts, but I just haven't had time. Does anyone have any comments on your testimony is going to be given on Tuesday? Did you say, Sandy?
Tomorrow. Has to be in by close of business tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought it was very good. I had a couple of comments, but I just didn't have time to put it in writing but I'll try to do it tonight.
If it's easier, I can give you a call either this evening or sometime tomorrow morning.
Okay, well, let me see where things stand.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other budget comments? The one question I did have, have you heard any reaction? I mean, I'm pleased to see that the governor actually increased our request a little. Any other reactions that you've gotten to the document that is relevant to our discussions?
Only very favorable reactions to it. But internally, I have not circulated it outside the agency.
I see. Well, the one macro question I had is, well, some people say, hey, why is your budget so much higher than it was last year when you didn't even spend all the money? The explanation being that it's a practical matter, we were so short-staffed. Is that something you should expand on more in your testimony?
Well, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think we have to assess whether we want to flag that. Particularly, we will briefly talk about staffing up and how we will be using the money. And the reality is we're going to use most of it because we do have to transfer a good deal of the personal services excess amount over to non-personal services. And our plan, if we can get the procurement done quickly, is to use as much of that as we can to prepay as far as the future as we can the new case management system, which will have a fair amount of cost associated with it. So until the dust settles on that, I know that Mike Angelini and Brian Weinberg and Mariana working together to try to get that procurement pushed ahead as quickly as possible. We have to do the procurement through OGS approved intermediaries. We can't go directly to the vendor, even though the software apparently has been vetted previously by ITS and others. But if we can get that done, that'll suck out a lot of it. So I'm not even clear how much of an excess we're going to have at the end of the day.
I see. Okay.
But I don't want to overstate it because we don't know if we can get that done in this fiscal year or within the window. And then after that, we don't know how many years we can go out in prepaying the annual running costs on that. For the consultant, we were able to look forward, I think, 3 years. He has access for last year, and we're hoping we can do the same.
I see. Okay.
So Michael, if I may, I would never want to highlight surpluses. I've seen where it's done budgets, fewer budgets in its day. I mean, highlighting surpluses, but asking for more is not a good idea.
Right, but what I'm worried about, Len, is the question, well, you have a surplus, why are you, why are you asking such a large increase, given the fact that you finished this year with a surplus?
So what I'm suggesting is that that wouldn't be something to lead in with, but rather to have an answer for if the question is asked.
All right.
It's a good answer, but I'm not sure as part of the introduction it should be.
And the other thing is, we're looking at the appropriation and actually the cash. And it's a fairly obscure entity, but the cash surplus is not, it's the appropriation surplus.
Okay.
And even looking at the extra money they gave us, I think they didn't realize this is what Mariana and I have constructed, and we don't want to disabuse them of it. We have factored in mandatory increases for the coming year, and they kind of double down on those increases. But the amount you're seeing is larger than the cash, and the cash is actually closer to where we were before.
And the computer system will really be an expense that we don't have this year at all.
We didn't have an expense. The CMS. Yeah, I mean, we pay something for the document management system that's going away. And this will encompass both systems, but that's relatively small.
Okay.
And we do have new audit software that we had approved last year, and that got hung up somewhere with ITS and some bugs. And maybe we can prepay some more of that as well.
All right. And are there any special people we should be talking to on the budget point? Or just wait to see what as things evolve, or there's a couple of people we should be particularly reaching out to?
Well, we've reached out to our budget people to find out if there's anything we need to look at further on that. But they gave us the money we were asking for, and we don't, just like last year, we don't have any reason to think we're in jeopardy. Yeah, but as I said earlier, I don't know if there's going to be some tussle that could affect us. I don't think so. Last year, whatever battles were fought over appropriations and allocations for big other projects had no impact on us. And the fact that when they had asked for a flat budget and we asked for more money, they gave it to us, suggests to me that at least the budget people and the chamber are on our side.
Good. Okay.
Maybe they're betting that we'll be held unconstitutional and they won't have to spend it.
They have a conflict. Okay. Okay. The next issue I want to raise is the open meetings law lobbying that sort of separate from everything else. What's the latest you've heard from the Open Meetings Law Committee, and where do we stand on that, Sandy?
We have not, since I circulated their annual report. That's the last word we had on that subject. I do understand that they have had conversations with the chamber about the legislation that needs to be introduced because 103-A is going to sunset, and the way the legislature restructured the law last time, the provisions for that had been in section 104 for virtual meetings kind of got subsumed by 103-A. So there may be some clarification that they want. So it's understood that 103-A, extraordinary circumstances, exceptions, and so on, weren't intended to have an impact on the ability to have virtual meetings and meetings connected from multiple sites using technology. It goes back to 2000, I think, that there was no intention to impact any of that in an adverse way. But that's the level of detail I have at this point. And I don't know if there's anything, we'll find out specifically that they're proposing as a result of that, beyond what's in Committee on Open Government's report.
But therefore, at the moment, there's no proposed legislation that anyone's going to introduce to affect our goal of eliminating the requirement, physical access requirement, right?
Nothing has been introduced to date. I check the introductions on a daily basis.
And so on that particular point, which is obviously critical for us, what should we be doing, or do we just have to sit and wait?
So we're in the first month of the legislative session, so I think it's not. I would anticipate that the legislature will take it up later this spring, if I were to speculate.
Okay, but then that raises the question, which also is relevant to other issues, but I think I singled this one out, and I don't mean to monopolize the conversation here, is what should the commission and what should individual commissioners be doing, if anything, with respect to trying to generate support for the change in the open meetings law, and in particular, reaching out to other groups that might join us in the fight? Am I just premature, or is there something we should be doing?
No, we will. Let's see where we come out overall today on the agenda, but we will be reaching out in the coming days to see where the proposals stand with respect to the sunsetting and replacing 103-A. And let's see where that is. As Keith said, nothing's been introduced. We haven't seen a draft. I don't know if they've drafted anything yet. They need to. One way or the other, something has to be drafted. So we'll get what intelligence we can and talk with the folks who are working on that. I understand that's in the chamber now, I believe it is. And then we can see, what input we need to want to have in that process.
Well, but there's nobody other than us who's at the moment who's advocating for the change in that we want, right?
The Committee on Open Government.
Well, they stated their position in the annual report, but it's not specific, it's amorphous. They're advocating for a relaxation of the requirement that a full quorum be present at one or more physical locations accessible to the public. That's how far they've gone. But what that turns into, we'll have to see.
Okay,
We'll have to see where they're going and what influence we can have on the legislation that's drafted to accommodate that. The report demonstrated that there's widespread support among those who are affected by the requirement for relaxation. And the committee said they support the relaxation.
Right. But I guess I'm concerned, though, that when all that is done, that it doesn't directly, at least unless something changes, repeal the requirement that we want repealed. And we did talk about the possibility of generating support from some good government groups like Reinvent Albany or some others to see if they would join us in pushing this point. Is this just premature to even be discussing this now?
No, it's not premature. It's just we don't have the answers to those questions. Those are the right questions to be asking, and we will ask them. I think now that the budget is out there, we can more readily get the attention of the folks we need to talk with to find out what the status of it is.
Right.
And I'll be having conversations with some of the relevant people in the next couple of days.
All right.
to find out where that stands, and what their expectations are.
Well, but then, of course, we have to think through who else we might want to, and that it'll be academic, who else we want to see will get on board with us. And we can postpone that discussion for a couple of weeks, but isn't that something that it's just a question of when we're going to do that? And of course, the sooner we start, the better off we are. Am I just being naive or impatient? Or is there something we should be doing now?
Well, let's find out where it stands and who's working on it. You know, we've had prior conversations with some of the relevant people who we might be expecting to have responsibility for the proposal. And we need to find out where, in light of whose report,
Okay.
they stand in law legislation. The last thing I heard was someone I previously talked with who wasn't expected to be moving the initiative forward. May turn out to be the person who will be tasked with that. So we have that contact. But
Okay.
you know, we just don't know at this point where they are, what their plan is for moving that along, and whether it's going to be an Article 7 bill, or they're going to propose it as a chapter law amendment to the open meetings law. Just don't know enough at this point, but we'll find out.
Okay. Well, anybody else have any thoughts on the open meetings law status as to where we are? All right.
Say, I continue to hope that we can get the kind of changes we'll need here in order for us to be able to more efficiently do business. And with those changes, we continue to provide, in fact, expand the access for the public to the deliberations of this body. So I hope those changes can actually happen.
Yeah, we don't want to find ourselves in one, at the end of the legislative session saying, oh gosh, now it's time for us to reach out to some groups to urge them to call the relevant legislators. So
I think though the bottom line is that COVID has really changed the game, and everybody is now used to virtual meetings. There is no reason why, if we need to call a committee meeting and we publicize it and live stream it, that anybody is prejudiced by virtue of attending by pushing a button on their computer, as opposed to having to schlep to wherever we are, including us having to schlep to wherever it has to be.
but in my view, it's not just this group that should be saying that. We should have a whole bunch of groups saying that and saying why and it's costing the state money, etc. And I just worry about waiting too long before we start that campaign, because once we say yes, we can start, we got a lot of people to try to think through who should be reaching out to.
Commissioner Cardoza, I'll remind you that at your suggestion in our public meeting, we now have approval from the full commission to begin that work.
That's my point. That's right. So do we do that now? It's not just the couple of organizations I know of, but should we try to think through some other groups that are? Someone told me that there's some county group that also didn't like this. I just worry about waiting until February before we try to think that through.
Well, let me just say this, and maybe this will help move it along. We had made the decision to defer placing the open meetings law amendment issue specifically on the legislative agenda partly because we had the expectation that others might have an affirmative proposal that we could get behind rather than being in leadership on that. There has to be a bill of some kind introduced. Otherwise, the way things are structured, there's going to be interpretational problems, if nothing else, in having virtual meetings going forward and having them at multiple locations, whether open to the public or not. So that has to be addressed. There has to be legislation. So I find out as quickly as we can. And hopefully it's not going to be a protracted process where that stands. And if it turns out we have to take the initiative in putting something out there, we could draft a proposal pretty quickly. And if it's the sense of the body, we can add that to the legislative agenda and make it one of the items that we're going to be promoting.
If you'll
forward.
I'm sorry, if you'll recall at our town hall meeting with the various good government groups, that was a topic that we discussed, and they certainly seemed to rally around the idea of us being more accessible via live streaming, committee meetings, et cetera. So I don't think that they are negative to it. In fact, they seemed rather gung ho about it.
And that's why I'm wondering, Len, is whether we could formalize that by, for example, calling Reinvent Albany or calling the city bar or calling some of the other groups. Maybe those are the wrong groups, getting them on board philosophically, at least now, and say, we'll be back in touch when we have the relevant document. But, they're probably going to say, well, we got to take a vote of our group, that kind of thing. And so I just worry about running out of time.
Commissioner Cardozo, is there anything that would keep you from having now, since we've all been given a green light by the full commission, do we want to divide these groups up? Do you want to, sort of take the initiative there so that we can start that?
I don't mind calling, but I don't want to sound like I know every group. And so, I would think that Seymour, rather than me as a person, better to call State Bar. I can call a couple, but then maybe there's some other groups that I don't know about, because it's not just good government groups. There are other governmental groups that are also adversely affected by this rule. I'm not sure who they are, but someone told me about this some kind of county group that used to complain about it. I don't know what that is, but I think we should try to identify other people who we don't know.
Can I just make a suggestion? I think I could take some time and talk with Sandy and come up with some groups that we might want to reach out to and run it by you, Commissioner Cardozo, and then via email, we could kind of say, okay, who's to reach out rather than taking time now. But we could do that as like a step going forward. I'll have that as a takeaway to do next week.
Great. That's good. Anybody else have any comments on that? But I think that would be very helpful, I think.
It's excellent.
And then that really raises the more macro issue on our legislative agenda more generally. Is there anything we should be doing now in terms of reaching out for other supporters, or is that all really premature?
I think a lot of this too could be done in the same conversation, so that we don't have to take two bites at the apple. If we could approach these groups with both things at the same time, I think that would be a more efficient use of everybody's time, because we have our legislative agenda developed.
Good. Okay.
If there's overlap.
That's fine. Then the other issue that we postponed to the meeting about scheduling this year's public meeting. I had been under the impression that last year after the public meeting, we decided we should schedule this year's public meeting sooner in the year. And I gather now there's a consensus or at least a debate about whether it should be postponed much later in the year. And I thought that we should discuss that as a committee.
Sandy, do you want me to kind of give an overview on that?
Sure.
Okay, so yes, initially, that's what the thinking was, that we would do it sooner. We do know that this working group also will be revisiting some of the proposals that we got at the end of last year that we didn't have time to fully vet to go on the next year's legislative agenda. So this group had that task assigned to it. As I got more involved in looking at what Commissioner Ayers presented and what staff put together as the path forward on the review of the advisory opinions and the regulations, there is a significant public and stakeholder outreach component and in several phases, right, as part of that review. It is my opinion, looking at the big picture, that we would have a much more productive public meeting if we could have our annual public meeting around those issues. So rather than having to go back out to twice and do the whole process twice, we start with phase one of our stakeholder outreach, which is to get like, what's the feel in the field? Are we doing surveys? What are we doing, right? Like, it hasn't been finalized, but we're going to be going out and getting information, taking it back, looking at it. Then we might be going back out again, looking at that information to where we get down to the line of, having had many touch points with stakeholders about these issues, to where we get to recommendations. And at the recommendation phase, when we're ready for that and commissioners can get behind recommendations, then we go and have the public meeting and say, what do you think? What are you thinking about these recommendations? This group, in the meantime, can be vetting all the proposals that we got last year that we said we had a table, and working through those so that we have one cohesive public outreach process going forward. Honestly, my office is not resourced to have two public outreach processes that involve going at the same time. So if we were to do like a public hearing in April as well, we'd have to wait to start the EO public outreach process. And I don't think we want to do that. And then there was all the follow-up from the public hearing. I don't know how we would have the bandwidth as an agency to do the follow-up that we did last year, while we're also still doing this whole other process that is kind of going to go through the same public outreach process, as in taking in the feedback, having staff review, having commissioners review. What do we think about it? What should we recommend? And it seems like two parallel processes that at the end of the day, the most efficient and fruitful way to do it is to do it as one uniform process. So as I got more involved with this, what's going to happen with this review process, it made more sense to me that this should really be of substance and we should combine them so we have one review process for this year. And it's not to say we're waiting to reach out and hear to people to the fall. We're going to be reaching out to them all year in different points to get information to feed to those recommendations. And we still have work to do with this group, like I said, on the ones that we got out of last year that we couldn't move forward. So it's not like people won't be hearing from us. It's not like they won't know what we're doing. They will know, they'll be hearing from us. They'll have opportunities for input. And then when we're ready to say, okay, everybody, here's our draft recommendations. Let's get our input there. That's when we do the public hearing.
I see.
Can I say something to that? So Emily, thank you for that. That was really helpful. And I just wanted to add, I think that it would be somewhat, I don't think it would work very well to have another public hearing at which I'm not saying anybody's proposing this, I'm just trying to think this through. I think it would not make a lot of sense to go back to people and ask for legislative recommendations, since we still haven't analyzed the last set of legislative recommendations that we got fully, and in other words, those are still on our plate. I don't want to go back and have another meeting where the groups come and say, well, what we'd really like is you to think about the same thing we said last time.
Right.
So I know that's not what you're suggesting. I'm just trying to think through like what's on our plate, as you say. This may be disagreeing a little bit with something you said. I think or I'm not sure. I don't like the idea of combining the meeting where we ask for input on our legislative agenda with the meeting where we ask for feedback for this comprehensive review of the regulations, because I think both of those are, I mean, one of them is literally comprehensive according to statute, but I think those are both large sets of issues. I think different stakeholders will be interested in those two conversations. And I think that there's so much to talk about in both of them that even if we have a full 3-hour-long meeting, inevitably one of those is going to overshadow the other. I mean, we didn't come close to running out of things to talk about at our roundtable, and that was a select screen group of people. We did run out of things to talk about at our last public hearing. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's actually not, but that was partly because of time limits. But anyway, I would advocate separating those. But the reason I raised this is that I know there's the annual public hearing, which we have to have. Last year, we added a roundtable on top of that and did two. And I totally respect and defer to staff's judgment that we can't do two full annual meetings. But I'm actually wondering if, like, I'm not sure that a meeting in March, when all of the advocates and much of the regulated community are focused on the legislative process, I'm not sure that that's what we need right now anyway, since we still have a plate full of legislative recommendations. And I don't know if that helps with scheduling, but I know that as Michael said, last time we said we were going to do it earlier, but now we have a plate full of stuff, and I don't know what we would do at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree I hear what you're saying. So in the process that I'm envisioning, our annual public meeting would be this meeting that is part of the review when we get to the end of in the third quarter. Separately, right, this group is going to be working on legislative proposals that we were given before, right? And we're going to be vetting them. And I kind of left it as a question mark, like later in the year, in like September or October, if we do decide to have a roundtable with our legislative agenda as it is then, right? Saying we know as a result of the full review, we might decide we need legislation, right? To do some of the things that we want to do in regulation. So we can, if we're ready, we can put it on our legislative agenda. But if we are not, then it has to wait. But yes, there's I totally agree with what you're saying. We just heard from them. They have homework that we're still doing, right? We need to vet out. And so let's focus on that and let's see what we get this year, right? We might have to carry over a lot of what's on our agenda this year to next year, plus this new stuff that we're vetting. So I think exactly what you're saying, like, we have stuff on our plate. We still have homework to do from what they told us last time. And if we go out right now, we're going to hear a lot of the same things and have to go through the process all over again. And we're not done with our original process. So yes, I agree with a lot of the things you're saying. And I agree we could have like another smaller meeting, like a roundtable again or something to go over our legislative agenda next for 25 rather than having that be feedback in the public hearing, the annual public hearing, if I'm understanding correctly.
So where does that leave the annual public hearing in that process?
It'll be what we do in the fall. Our annual public hearing will be in the fall, which is but it will be the same as the public hearing for our recommendations on the review. Because
so the comprehensive review thing and the annual public hearing will be the same.
Yes, but we could have a separate roundtable on the legislative agenda. Yes.
Okay. I think I strongly support what you just said, and I'm grateful very much for you walking us through all that.
Thank you.
I think that's right. And in the meantime, I assume the staff is continuing to analyze, and I know they started already on some proposals that they thought were worth taking a look at, but they didn't want to take a formal position yet.
I think we need to agree on what that list is, right? And that group will help with this. I think we need to go back and say, okay, these were the few things, and other things have come up in subsequent meetings, right? So I think we as a work group here just need to say, okay, maybe at our next meeting or via email, these are the things I had in my notes. These are the things I had in my notes. Okay, these are the things we're going to look at as our homework. This was our homework.
I see Carol, is Keith here? I can't.
Yes, I'm good.
He's here.
Yeah.
So I assume the staff, I know they had started looking at some of these other proposals. And so when you think it's time, we should be sitting down with you and discussing them, or am I just being premature? Or how should that work?
Yeah, the chart identified those matters that we thought were worthy of further consideration, but required further consideration before we advance them to, active advocacy for them. So we have those marked out. And so we have to ensure that we're going to complete that process while we're also pursuing the comprehensive review.
Wait, I'm sorry. Just,
So that will be going forward the next couple of months, and we'll then find a meeting and talk about some of these. Is that a fair way to put it?
There's going to be, I believe there's going to be a fair amount of overlap in the various processes. And, we'll just have to be mindful so we're not duplicating or triplicating effort as we go forward. But, none of these things are unrelated. We're talking about fundamental things for the agency.
Right.
sorry, can I just clarify, Sandy, earlier you said, it sounded like you were referring to a document that has the list of issues that staff is looking at with an intent to come back and talk about them.
Yeah, we had identified those in the last few iterations of the spreadsheet that we had for tracking the 90 some odd, I think it was the number, of proposals that were self-generated, but mostly came out of the public hearing, the annual public hearing last year. And we identified those that we thought it made sense to advocate for in the coming cycle.
I remember, yeah, we chose for the.
Yeah, but we also identified those that we specifically said requires, more consideration and thought. And
We'll get them on a list, call them out, get them on a list, so then we can start the process to move those.
Yeah, and I don't know that we discussed them per se in the round table, but we did indicate that we had identified another tranche, if you will.
That was my question about whether that group of issues and proposals made it into this list that you're describing. Because
Yeah,
Yes.
nothing disappeared.
There's two
Nothing
lists.
disappeared
There's
from the list.
And then there's the public hearing list. We'll marry them into one. This is our homework list. We'll do that.
sounds great. I just want to add that my reaction on the earlier list from the spreadsheet is that particularly now with the benefit of experience, I think that an awful lot of the things on that list were not things that need to be addressed at the level of the commissioners, that they struck me as implementation level issues that staff should be managing. And so I hope that there's an opportunity at some point for us to say, like, please let's not surface to the full commission issues about how the website is worded or.
No, we've already done that process. That process is done. That implementation process is done. We've whittled down now to the ones that were legislative proposals that we said we need to do more homework. So we already did we made the updates to the website. Yes.
Thank you.
We did that.
Let me just ask a question, if I might, about the timing, and if I was distracted, I apologize if I missed it, but what's the timing we think for the legislative roundtable?
So we could put that on probably like September, October, I would guess, to do that. So we have a little bit more time. And we will have done our homework by then and have this up for discussion. Where again, if brand new things come up, we're going to have to say, we'll fold this into the next one if we need to, because we took our homework from the last one. And if we have homework from the next one, that's fine too.
And go ahead, Seymour, I'm sorry.
I think we probably only need a little lead time after the public hearing because there may be other proposals that they're recommending.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They might not make it this year because as we're doing it, we're taking our homework from last year and moving that forward, right? And
Right, but we do that this spring.
Comprehensive review, as part of the comprehensive review, we're going to hold the public hearing on that, which will be in the third quarter. It is very likely that there will be legislative proposals that might come out of that. What I cannot promise we're going to have enough time to vet and do our homework on all of those in time for the 2025 agenda. What I can say is the ones we're looking at now and the ones that maybe don't get passed this year, that we then take to the roundtable in September and October, because we will not have had the public meeting at the time of the roundtable. So our legislative agenda roundtable will be independent of what's coming out of the public hearing, because that's going to be a much longer process. And it's just, we can't condense it in time to make it merry if you want to have a legislative roundtable, agenda roundtable in September, October.
We could find ourselves in a position, though, of needing to have some kind of legislative strategic session with other stakeholders around some of the things that we want to see advanced in this session of the legislature.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we may, as we go forward, let's see what kinds of decisions we get. And some may have more urgency than others, as we move forward. Also, I don't want to say we've exhausted all of the proposals that our constituencies have, because we're going to take a much more probing look at that to tease those out. But in terms of the agendas that the various groups who did offer us proposals have, I don't know that we could anticipate that they're going to have an equally robust slate next time. I imagine we'll, to the extent we're not moving forward on some that they proposed before, we'll propose those again. And some new things may pop up. But I don't know that we would expect to get as many, 96 proposals, in the next cycle.
I think that's fair, although this year we held it in October, right? We had the roundtable in
November 1st. It was November 1st.
November, in November 1st. Okay, in November 1st. And we haven't even started as a commission looking at those proposals.
Well, we focused them on the legislative agenda that we had derived from the March.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying that if ideas come up at the meeting, I share what I took to be Seymour's concern that we'll find ourselves in a position where we have to say, like, well, maybe next year.
That might just be the nature of the beast, though, because we don't want to rush the review, right? And it's not like we're not going to have a legislative agenda. We will have a legislative agenda, but until we fully vet what recommendations, and if they're ready to go, if we feel like we're ready and we don't need to do more homework, we can put them on. But if we were like, oh, that's an interesting idea, let's look more into that. We'll have that the ability at that time to make those calls.
Okay, so I think that we're ahead of ourselves, and we should just keep track of the internal work that's been done with us as far as the potential new proposals, and we'll take a look at where things are time-wise in a couple of months to make a further decision as to when we want to schedule the annual meeting. Is that a fair way to put it? Now, there was one other issue, Fred, that you said to the legislative committee meeting today. I forget what it was. Well, it doesn't matter.
I'll take a look at my notes because I've drawn a blank as well. Let's take a look at I think the most discussion we had was around the open meetings law, which is really pressing. Of course, the budget, which we've discussed. And I'll just take a look at the notes and we can discuss it at another time. But I think those are our priorities right now.
I just said one other thought. Just that when we do start reviewing the proposals that we heard about at the November 1st roundtable, I think I may have said this before, forgive me, but I'm skeptical of the value added from having a separate committee meeting apart from the full commission, just because when we did our last time through this process, I think we had a very duplicative discussion in the full commission that raised so many of the same questions and demanded so many of the same answers that we had given in the committee. And because this is a time-sensitive process, my suggestion would be that we just go straight from staff's recommendation and have staff present that to the full commission rather than doing it in a small group. I'm happy to defer to others, but that's my sense of, I think we could reduce the time spent on this process if we did it that way without losing as much.
I think we can see where things stand, and in the meantime, the staff will be working on some of these issues, and lots of things can change. I just wanted to be sure, if this is now the legislative working group, that we're not behind the 8 ball and that we, have a plan. It sounds to me like we do have a plan, and we'll have to keep our ear close to the ground and rely on the staff. And I assume the staff will let us know if there's something more we should be doing now. Anyone else on the working group have any other questions or suggestions. I do want to thank Emily in particular for setting out that schedule of how we should be approaching things that she distributed to us. And that's good. Anybody else have any other comments that they want to make at the moment on this? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. It was great.
Adjourn.
It's great to spend a short day with all of you online.
Do something of stuff.
Okay.
Take care of yourself, feel better.
Better.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, Davina and